7 Commitment 2022 special. Republican Don Bacon, Democrat Tony Vargas, in a debate for the election of Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. Here is KETV Newswatch 7's Julie Cornell.
Hello and welcome to our Commitment 2022 special. This hour is part of our ongoing effort to provide you with an unfiltered look at the candidates and issues in this year's election. We're joined here in studio by Republican incumbent Congressman Don Bacon and the Democratic candidate for Congress in Nebraska's District 2, State Senator Tony Vargas. Thank you both for taking part in this forum today.
Thank you.
Well, for the next hour, we'll be posing questions to the candidates, and each candidate will have a 1 minute for opening statement. And after each question, each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond and a 45-second rebuttal. Toward the end of the hour, we may eliminate rebuttals to the last question to make sure that we have time for closing statements. So a coin flip with the campaigns determine the order of opening and closing statements. We begin with Congressman Don Bacon.
Well, thank you, Julie. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for giving me the opportunity to serve you and to represent you. I was raised on a farm. I was the oldest of 9 kids. I worked often 2 jobs until I joined the Air Force, and it was a great childhood, and I learned a lot. I joined the Air Force at 21. I had 16 assignments over 30 years. I retired as a brigadier general. Five commands to include Offutt Air Force Base, the largest employer in the local area, and 4 deployments to the Middle East. As your representative, I was honored to be selected as the #1 elected official in America for seeking common ground and trying to make and working across the aisle. Our office was selected as the #1 office in all of Congress for constituent services. And I was selected as the Legislator of the Year for Chamber of Commerce, the equipment manufacturers, the American Veterans, or AMVETS, as well as one of the largest unions, the steamfitters and the plumbers. So I hope I have retained your trust. I ask for your support and your vote. Thank you.
Senator Vargas.
Thank you very much for doing this and moderating KTV, for hosting, and for everybody participating in democracy, and to my wife being in studio with me. My name's Tony Vargas. I'm running for Congress, and look, here's the reason why. I'm a proud son of immigrants. My parents worked 2 or more jobs pretty much their entire lives, and when you watch your parents sacrifice that for you, that for the American dream, it's the reason why I fought, not only to make sure our communities are better as a former public school science teacher, as a former school board member for Omaha Public Schools, but also as a state senator. For the last 6 years, I'm fighting for working families, for jobs, for health care, for education, but also for controlling our spending and costs and doing everything I can to provide relief. That's why I bucked my party and voted for historic tax relief, $1.5 billion in property, income, and Social Security relief on behalf of you. I was named a taxpayer defender for it. That's why I'm going to fight no matter what for working families, and that's why I'm asking for your vote for Congress for Nebraska's 2nd District.
Thank you, Senator. Well, a coin flip also determined our opening question. We'll go first to Congressman Don Bacon. So the parent company of CHI Health are currently dealing with a ransomware attack that's led to significant outages in their systems. And they're certainly not the first company to face a cyber attack. What should Congress do to bolster cyber defenses both in private industry and in government?
That's a great question, Julie. When I served in the Air Force for my last assignment, I oversaw cyber training for the United States Air Force. I primarily was focused on the cyber intelligence aspects of this. We have several countries that are big threats to our infrastructure. Russia has a more malevolent intention. They want to do ransomware. They want to create problems, to create dysfunction with our communications. China, on the other hand, does it more for intelligence purposes, and then it ranges on from there. Right now, our infrastructure, our private companies do not have the ability to defend themselves against Russia or China. They have their very best folks that have been trained through their government attacking our companies. Because of that, I have a bill that passed the House, I still need to get out of the Senate, that instructs or directs the federal government to protect our infrastructure and private companies. Because you can't let CHI, or it could be JBS that was attacked earlier, Colonial Pipeline was attacked earlier. They don't have the ability to go up against Russia's and China's best. Our NSA can, our Cyber Command can. I've worked in those organizations. I know those people well. And they can provide that expertise to defend our private companies and our infrastructure. If they don't do it, we will remain vulnerable. And we should never allow or facilitate the ransom money going to these people, because it just facilitates more of these attacks in the future. We got to work with these companies and help protect them.
Thank you. Senator Vargas.
Thank you very, very much. Look, we need to make sure that we are protecting access, making sure that we are protecting privacy, and fighting against this unnecessary and dangerous access that's actually been what we're seeing happening here. Like we have an opportunity to make sure we're investing more in cybersecurity. In the legislature, I think one of the things that we can do, what's an evidence of what I've done, is making sure we're investing in STEM, making sure we're investing in the healthcare sector and those privacy concerns. At the federal level, I'll work to make sure we are investing in the type of cybersecurity measures that we need. There are solutions to these problems. We're clearly, and hopefully this is a nonpartisan issue. At the end of the day, we have to get tough, because what we're seeing from these global threats, not only from China and Russia, is that we need to make sure we're defending and making sure the companies have the resources they need. Now, when I heard about this and people were telling me, it was a real concern for privacy concerns. And I will be a champion to make sure that the companies and our government make sure that they're supporting companies and doing everything they can to address cybersecurity across this country.
Congressman?
You know, I have 2 of my 4 children are involved in the cyber world. One has worked on cyber protection, focused on overseas threats. The other one does more software programming. And though I've served in the military, recruiting cyber experts into the military and at NSA and Cyber Command, they're not of the same folks who maybe be infantry people or snipers or artillery. So I think we need to think bigger about how we recruit our cyber expertise out of our high schools and colleges, because what maybe your typical standard infantry person or artillery person may not be the same person that we recruit at Cyber Command, National Security Agency, and so forth. So I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I have the ability to help work this agenda and create, I think, a better recruitment process so we can defend ourselves.
Senator?
As a state senator, I work to make sure that we are investing more in University of Nebraska, Omaha, and their cybersecurity and their counterintelligence and counterterrorism programs. And the reason is I was a former science teacher. I know that we only can get better if we have the type of recruitment and the type of pathways for individuals to get into the right jobs and get the right training. We have a real beacon here in UNO, and I want to make sure we're investing in those resources. But at the end of the day, we need somebody that's going to continue to step up for this, has a background in it, and I have that background. I'm going to do everything I can to invest in that.
Thank you, Senator. Another national security issue. Not since the Cuban Missile Crisis have we heard so much discussion about the threat of the use of nuclear weapons. As a member of Congress, what actions would you support against Russia or North Korea to reduce that threat? We'll start with Senator Vargas.
One, this is a real threat, and it's not a real threat that you normally hear. We're hearing it in this day and age, and it's because Russia is doing everything they can to undermine Ukraine, and also is fighting on a global scale and is not only threatening democracies, but is threatening the well-being of the region and national security. We have to respond. But the way that we respond is what we've been continuing to doing. I support the efforts of not only the administration and Congress in working to then continue to fund military and intelligence efforts, and I'm going to support everything I can to continue to make sure that they have the resources they need to respond. But we cannot be, we have to make sure that we are mindful that this is a real concern. I'm worried about nuclear threat. I'm worried about that. And the only way that we're going to be able to respond is making sure we have the resources to Ukraine so that they can squash this and address this threat. And I'm going to do everything I can in Congress to support that.
Thank you. I served at STRATCOM when I was younger. And then when I was a brigadier general, I was trained to fly on the Looking Glass mission, we call it. So it was on the Airborne Alert Mission. My job as a general there was, in case the ground facilities got hit by a sneak attack from Russia or China, I could take over all of our nuclear forces from the air. So I have direct experience and training in this area. The most important thing we need right now is deterrence. Our nuclear deterrence is too old, and multiple administrations have been too late to fund it. Our ICBMs, of which 70 ICBMs are in western Nebraska, are 50 years old. They cannot be extended. Our B-52 bombers are 60 years old. Imagine driving that 60-year-old car and thinking you could deliver nuclear weapons with it. Well, that's what our maintenance folks are having to deal with. Our B-2 bombers are 30 years old, but that stealth technology is too old. Then we have submarines, the Ohio-class submarine that is also 30 years old. So my point is, our triad, the nuclear deterrence, is aging. And I've led efforts in Congress to fund every part of that nuclear triad. Now, unfortunately, the president, under Joe Biden, wanted a 4% cut in the military. There's no way that could have took care of our triad and also took care of all the other needs we have with Ukraine. With my support, we were able to get that 4% back and actually increase spending by 1 or 2% so that we could have a nuclear deterrence. And we can't let Putin bully us around. We got to stand up to him, otherwise he will continue to threaten us.
Senator Vargas.
Look, we need to make sure that we're addressing this threat. And the best way to do it is to make sure we're continuing to invest in our military and make sure that we are providing everything we can, not only to the administration, but to Congress, to make the most informed decisions possible. We need to make sure that we understand that Russia's a threat, and if we don't directly address this and provide the resources we need to Ukraine, we're going to see this threat continue to expand. And I want to make sure that we're prioritizing our national security.
There's no doubt that President Putin is trying to threaten and bully, and we can't let him do that. You back down once, he'll do it again. It is in our national security interest, too, to have Ukraine as an independent country. So I was concerned when the president in a fundraiser started talking about nuclear Armageddon. We got to be careful that we don't raise the heat up too much and the loud noise on this. We need to be steady, calm, but do not back down to this Russian bully. Otherwise, he'll continue to raise the ante and try to get what he wants through threats and bullying.
Thank you, Congressman. Let's turn to the economy now. The American Rescue Plan is pumping millions into the local economy. Nonprofits and local governments will benefit from that cash infusion, but it's likely contributing to the inflation we're all feeling. How would you have changed pandemic relief to better serve the economy? We'll start with Congressman Bacon.
The first 4 COVID bills were needed. We had forced businesses to shut down. People needed help. We had a huge part of our country not working. And so the Paycheck Protection Plan, aid to the theaters, all these things that we were doing, they were necessary. But after the election and the administration was sworn in, people were getting back to work. The need for that 5th COVID bill was a lot less necessary. And when the president proposed a $2 trillion, $1.9 trillion to be precise, spending bill, it was Democrat economists who warned us not to do it because we were coming out of the COVID, coming out of the recession. The economy was firing on all cylinders at that point. And so Larry Summers, who worked for Bill Clinton, but who also worked for Barack Obama, he was the Secretary of Treasury, the Chief Economic Advisor, said, don't do this with no pay-fors. You got to have cuts to go with it because you're going to see a serious inflation. So President Biden came in with a 1.5% inflation or cost of living increases, and immediately when this bill was passed, we saw inflation skyrocket. Now we're at 8.2%. Food is at 13% up, and we can just go on and on. People today cannot afford groceries or utilities. The average family has lost $5,000 a month from this reckless spending. And so we should have heeded the advice of Larry Summers and other Democratic economists, Steve Ratner. These are 2 Democrats who said, don't do it. But the Democratic leadership did not listen to them, and we have the inflation that we have today.
Senator Vargas.
Thank you very much. Look, I'm a working parent, and I'm the product of a working family. I saw exactly what happens when it's difficult to be able to make ends meet. It's one of the reasons why for the last 6 years in the state Senate, I've been fighting on behalf of working families. It's clear that people need continued support. That's why I fought for better jobs, for healthcare access and education, and made sure that we were controlling our spending. Balanced budgets as a member of the Appropriations Committee that enabled us to do a lot more in not only providing historic tax relief, but targeting it to low-income families and making sure we were making it easier. For senior citizens, we eliminated the Social Security taxation. For individuals on income tax and property tax relief, historic numbers. And we did it because people are going through a really tough time. Congressman Bacon has said that we're in a recession, but then he's also saying that people are getting back to work and they don't need any help. We need somebody that is going to step up and realize that there's something that we actually need to do to both control costs and provide necessary relief. That's why my entire career has been trying to do just that. And even during these last 6 months, 7 months, I've been working across the aisle to make sure the funds that we do have are invested appropriately in job creation and getting people back on their feet. And that's the kind of leadership I'm going to bring to Congress.
Thank you. Congressman.
Well, unfortunately, Tony doesn't have his facts straight on this. We were coming out of a recession. People were going back to work. And then we did this $1.9 trillion COVID bill. It created the inflation. And it wasn't just this, it was also a terrible energy policy that created a huge increase in gas prices. But this inflation caused the Fed to then raise the interest rates. The interest rates are double today for buying a home, one of the highest interest rates we had in a long time. That created then the recession. And then that also hurt the stock market, where $11 trillion have been lost in the stock market. We have so many people in Omaha right now come up to me and they're going, Don, we're having to postpone retirement. It all goes back to this initial decision of a $1.9 trillion bill with zero pay-fors, adding 10% of the money supply into the money system. That devalues your money by 10%.
Senator Vargas, your rebuttal.
Thank you. Congressman Bacon, you said we were in a recession in one of your TV ads. Look, I've been working to control our costs in the Nebraska legislature and was even named a taxpayer defender providing tax relief. And you're talking about making it easier for working families. I make $12,000 a year as a state senator. You've made more than $1 million as a member of Congress for your salary. I've been fighting on behalf of working families because I know what they're going through, and you voted against a middle-class tax cut, and you're trying to gut Social Security and Medicare. So if you really want to stand up for working families, make sure we're protecting those, not trying to gut them. Because what you're just saying to the public is, I'm really worried about your retirement, I'm worried about your pocketbooks, but not enough to actually vote in your best interests.
Julie, we are in a recession now because of these policies.
Okay, Congressman, we're going to move on here. The next question goes first to Senator Vargas. Despite record cash reserves and budget surpluses in the local and state level, Nebraskans face one of the highest tax burdens in the Midwest, which is largely a state and local issue. But what can Congress do to help provide or promote meaningful tax reform to Nebraskans? Senator Vargas.
You know, I've worked my entire career in the Nebraska legislature to try to fight on behalf of working families. And it's because I'm a working parent. I have my daughter Ava and my son Luca. And I want to make sure it's easier for them. And we've been listening to voters, not to polls, not to anything else, but listening to them, because this community, they're hurting right now. And then my experience in the legislature has been balanced budgets, controlling our spending. And because of that, we were able to provide historic tax relief. And I bucked my party to do that. And even when we were working on creating job creation just 2-3 years ago through our tax incentive work, I made sure we had fiscal guardrails to make sure that we were not overspending. It's clear we need to send a leader to Congress that has experience of bucking their party to then control spending and investing and putting money back in people's pockets. But unfortunately, Congressman Bacon has had the opportunity to make it easier for working families. He voted against the middle-class tax cut that would have made it easier for you. He voted against lowering prescription drug costs that would have clearly made it easier for working families. And as I mentioned, he is trying to gut Social Security and Medicare. Those are your earned benefits. I want to make sure that we're controlling our spending, and I think we can do it, but we need new leadership. And that's the reason why I'm running for Congress, because I'm never going to forget where I came from. I'm going to fight for you no matter what.
Congressman Bacon.
Well, we'll start off with that last comment. He's going to fight for you no matter what. He has voted present, not voting, or skipped votes almost 20% of the time. He has been AWOL almost 1 day out of 5 voting, so he's not out there fighting for you. He's trying to dodge votes that are unpopular, or he doesn't want to take a stand one way or the other way. I was the 12th most bipartisan member of Congress, according to Georgetown University. The Common Ground Committee said I was the #1 elected official in America for seeking common ground and consensus. But I want to talk specifically about a couple of his comments I find are just inaccurate and deceptive. He wanted a $600 million tax increase, income tax increase on Nebraska. It would have made us the 5th highest income tax state. And this is his bill. He wanted us to be the 5th highest income tax state in the country, behind his home state of New York, which is number 4. He also voted for a $321 million tax surplus, income tax surplus tax. He was one of the deciding votes stopping a $590 million tax credit that was done a couple years ago. And on this bill that he's talking about that we voted on this year, he voted against it every single time and supported the filibuster, and at the last minute switched. Chairwoman Luann Linehan has been on radio criticizing him for opposing it and trying to stop it at every step of the way, and at the very last minute, flipping his vote. We know where he really stands. He wants us to be the 5th highest income tax state in the country.
Senator Vargas, your response.
Thank you very much. Look, this is the reason why Congressman Bacon is scared. I fought on behalf of working families. I've actually balanced budgets because I am a working parent. Making $12,000 a year versus making more than $1 million on taxpayers' dime. It's clear that he is threatened by that. I'm always going to work on behalf of you. At the end of the day, I voted for historic tax relief, not only for seniors, for working families, for property tax relief, but Congressman Bacon has voted against the interest for lowering prescription drug costs, wants to gut Social Security and Medicare, and voted against lowering insurance premiums. He's trying to hide the fact that he did that against you, and I'm always going to stand up for you, no matter what.
Congressman, your response.
I want to talk about him being recognized by the Americans for Taxpayers, or AFP, I should say, Americans for Prosperity. 1 year, when the year that he decides he wants to run for Congress, he hits 80. The 2 years before that, he averaged 43%. The 2 years before that, he averaged 48%. The American Conservative Union rated him, before he announced he was going to run for Congress, as the most liberal senator in the unicameral. He was ranked 49 of 49 on a conservative rating, the most liberal there. So now that he's running for Congress, he fights tax reform at every step and at the last minute flips. But let's remember, it was his bill that wanted us to be the 5th highest income tax state in the entire country.
Thank you, Congressman. We have another question about government spending. So according to the U.S. Treasury Department, the federal deficit has climbed from $0.4 trillion in 2015 to $1 trillion in 2019, and then spiked to $3.1 trillion when the pandemic hit in 2020. This spans 2 administrations. What must be done to bring the deficit spending under control? We start with Congressman Bacon.
The key thing that we need to do is hold spending to at least inflation, and hopefully slightly below inflation. The administration wanted a 13% increase in domestic spending this year. That's 5 points higher than inflation. That is part of the reason we have the terrible inflation we have today. Is this administration, and also under Speaker Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they can't seem to spend enough money. We need to have divided government now to force the administration back to the middle. You know, back in 1992, Bill Clinton, for 2 years, was doing the same thing. And then we got the majority back in Congress, and Bill Clinton then had to come to the middle, and we eventually got to balanced budgets. We need to have something like that happen again, where we have a Republican-led Congress, hopefully a Senate and a House, where we compel the president to be more fiscally responsible, start working in the middle, keeping spending within inflation or below. Because this is one of the 2 primary factors that people today are spending 13% more for food. Our money's being devalued by this all Democratic-controlled White House, Senate, and House with their spending. People are paying 25% more for gas, 33% more for fuel or for energy, and it goes on and on. The poorest amongst us are being hurt the most, and it's the reckless spending is one of the 2 main contributors for it. Thank you.
Senator Vargas.
Thank you very much. Congressman Bacon, you can talk and blame the other side and the other party, but then say that you're moderate and you care about finding consensus. You already said you voted for 4 out of 5 of the spending bills. And then you want to lay claim that that is the only reason, that those don't affect inflation whatsoever. My record in the legislature has been passing more than 55 bills into law. I've actually balanced budgets. I've gotten elected to leadership by my Republican and Democratic colleagues. I didn't do that alone. I did that because I earned the trust of my colleagues and actually the trust of Nebraskans to actually work across the aisle and buck the party when it matters. And I controlled spending. I know that threatens you because it's a different type of individual running for Congress. It's not going to belittle somebody just because of their background or their political affiliation. Whereas on the other side, your record of fighting on behalf of working families, you voted against their interests for lowering prescription drug costs or lowering insurance premiums. And you've taken more than $500,000 from prescription drug companies and insurance companies. It's clear who you work on behalf of. We need to send somebody to Congress that knows what a working class family is going through. And that's what I've been going through. That's why I'm going to fight for you.
Congressman, your rebuttal.
I was raised on a farm, middle class. I was a second lieutenant worked myself up through the ranks, middle class. I feel God's been very good to me, and I thank the Lord. I was able to make general and be elected to do this. But let's talk about the prescription drugs. Tony and a lot of the folks on the left, they want to reduce research and development. America leads the world in inventions and cures, but they want to attack that. And that's how they go about trying to set drug prices. I voted for the insulin bill, the standalone bill. I was one of 12 Republicans who did that. But then Pelosi put that, and Chuck Schumer, put that in with a bigger bill that was going to be 87,000 more IRS agents. It was going to raise taxes by $225 billion and raise your gas tax, your diesel tax, and natural gas. It was a bad bill.
Okay, I think we're still talking about deficit spending. Senator Vargas?
Congressman Bacon, you talk about voting for voting for capping insulin. And in the bill that you voted for, which didn't pass, by the way, the bill that actually passed that controlled the cap on insulin, you voted against. And you take credit for it in your ads. I actually voted for bills like property tax relief and bucked my party and did it because I wanted to stand up for working families. So I showed up and voted in their interests. But when you had the opportunity, you voted against their interests. That's why I'm running for Congress, because a lot of the political talk blaming the left or blaming the party system, I'm not pointing blame on anybody. I want to be a problem solver and actually work on delivering solutions for you.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question. As elected officials, where would you have found the most frustration in your efforts to enact legislation to help the economy? And what kind of legislation would you prioritize? We're going to start with Senator Vargas.
Look, the one thing that I want to make sure to do on working on enacting legislation is one of the things I continue to hear right now, which is we have to address our economy. We need to make sure we are investing in addressing our spending costs, but we also need to make sure that we are investing in people again. And as a member of the Appropriations Committee, I have prioritized investing in jobs, in workforce, and in people, and in our education system, while also controlling our spending. And then when I have the opportunity in Congress, what I want to make sure we do is continuing to make that record on investing in working families. The easiest way for us to do that is to make sure we're prioritizing trying to give a middle-class tax cut and controlling our spending as much as possible. But unfortunately, Congressman Bacon, when he had the opportunity, he voted against actually providing a middle-class tax cut for working families. Look, I've bucked my party before. And I think one of the things I want to work on is also creating the types of jobs here. That's why trying to bring domestic jobs and making us more competitive on a global scale is critical. Unfortunately, Congressman Bacon voted against the CHIPS Act, which would invest in jobs here in Nebraska and make us more competitive. I want to take my record of working across the aisle and getting things done, and on behalf of working families, to Congress. But because it's clear, Congressman Bacon continues to focus on the ultra-wealthy and the corporate interests, and I want to make sure I'm fighting for both businesses and people.
Congressman.
Again, I have to remind folks and Tony, he was rated 49 of 49 by the American Conservative Union, the most liberal man in the Senate until he decided to run for the House. And the AFP, for Americans for Prosperity, rated him at 43% before he decided to run for Congress. That's the real Tony Vargas. And I support tax cuts. I have voted for all tax cuts, period. And we did do a middle-class permit or a middle-class tax cut back in 2017 when the average family, middle-class families, got $2,000 back. But it also had business taxes lowered to 21%, which is the average in the world. And so to your question, Julie, one of the things that are most frustrating is how this gets demagogued. When the average family, 95% of the families got a tax cut, folks like Tony want to disparage it, say it didn't happen, but it did happen. 95% got money back. Average family, $2,000. Now, the one thing we have to do is make those tax cuts permanent. And that is the frustration because the other side of the aisles fought that because they don't want to make those tax cuts permanent. And I hope that this year, when we're in the majority, we can pass it again out of the House, hopefully we can get it out of the Senate, and maybe we can convince President Biden to pass these tax cuts and make them permanent. I also want to talk about the Social Security and Medicare. I'm one of the few people who have offered solutions working with Democrats. That's why the AARP recognized me as being a man of courage or a legislator of courage, because I am trying to save it. Folks like Tony don't want to offer any suggestions, and if we do nothing, it will go insolvent in 2035. I want to save it.
Senator Vargas, your rebuttal.
The public should know that both of us voted for tax cuts. Mine are actually permanent. Congressman Bacon already said that they're not permanent for you. But he really fought on behalf of corporate interests in this bill. They're the ones that got the biggest piece of the pie. And that's a threat to him, because if the public knows that the people that got the most cuts in this are the ultra wealthy and the corporate interests in this country, but not you. There's not a permanent tax cut in there for you. But I fought for permanent tax cuts in Nebraska. I voted for it and showed up and voted for that. At the end of the day, I'm a product of a working class family. I want to make sure that I'm making it easier for families, not harder.
Congressman, your rebuttal.
He proposed to make Nebraska the 5th highest income tax state. It was his bill. He wrote it. And now he's trying to walk away from it. And he opposed the tax cuts at every step of the way till the last minute when he knew it was going to pass. And Lou Ann Linehan's going to be very public about this in the weeks to come, and others that Tony served with. They don't like the deception, just the talking down to the voters here as if they won't figure this out. But if you oppose a bill at every step and then switch at the last minute once you know it's going to pass, we know the truth. And when it comes to business taxes, the average in the world is 21%. We were at 35%. We lowered it to 21%. We want American business to be on the same playing field so our businessmen and women can win, compete, and be the best businessmen, the most successful businessmen and women in the world.
Well, we move now to health care. The Inflation Reduction Act, it caps annual drug expenses for seniors, gives Medicare the power to negotiate drug prices. A proposal in the U.S. Senate would eliminate those provisions. What should Congress' role have in controlling prescription drug prices, or how do you propose to lower drug costs for Americans? We're going to start with Congressman Bacon.
One of the most important things that we can do is have the rest of the world help pay for our research and development. America produces the most discoveries, and I'm proud of this, by the way, that we produce the most discoveries and cures. We have great scientists and researchers, and the whole world benefits. But yet, the whole world, or most of the world, does not pay for that R&D. When they make contracts with American companies right now and make trade deals, they're paying for prescription drugs at the production cost, plus some profit. We got to intervene here to ensure that the rest of the world helps shoulder this research and development cost. It doesn't just fall on American consumers. That's what's going on right now. So I think that is one of the key things that we can do. And Medicare is one of the most important things for our retirees. And I'm dedicated to saving it. It's supposed to go insolvent within the next 5 or 6 years. But yet, the other side of the aisle would like to treat it as a football game. Don't touch it. If we try to intervene, it gets politicized. But we're going to have to look at how we're going to get more money into the Medicare, because our seniors depend on it, count on it, and our seniors can know that I am committed to saving our Medicare and our Social Security. I know how important it is. I've had grandmothers and grandfathers depend on it, my aunts and uncles, and so many constituents, say this is their sole source of income. But by the way, inflation hurts these people the most when it's their sole income, and we need to have a conservative governance that controls this reckless spending that's triggered this inflation.
Senator Vargas, your response.
I hope everybody heard that. Corporations deserve a cut. We heard that previous in the answer. But for Medicare, you want to gut Medicare and Social Security. We don't want to make investments in Medicare and Social Security, but we do need to do it for corporations, exactly what Congressman Bacon just said. Look, he has received more than $500,000 from corporate lobbyists in the insurance industry and the drug industry. And when he had the opportunity, he voted against those bills, against the bills that would have lowered prescription health care costs for you. He didn't have an answer to it because he knows he is vulnerable on this issue. When you're going to either the hospital or you're getting your prescription drugs refilled and you see how expensive they are, Congressman Bacon voted against those bills that would have lowered the cost for you. And when you're a senior citizen, and Social Security and Medicare are some important earned benefit lifelines for you, he wants to put corporate cuts ahead of the solvency and the investments in Social Security and Medicare. I want to fight on behalf of working families because I'm a product of one. And as much as he's trying to get other people to hold the water for him, I did receive a Taxpayer Defender Award and recognition for this. And it was because of my votes over the last several years. And I'm going to continue to defend fighting for working families, whereas he's going to continue to fight on behalf of the corporate lobbyists and the ultra wealthy in this country.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, your rebuttal.
He got a taxpayer award for the year he's running for Congress. The 2 years before that, it was 43%. The 2 years before that was 48%. We know what he really is about. And let's see, so he's saying he would have voted for this bill that the insulin bill was shoved into with massive billions and billions and billions of dollars of other spending. So what he's saying is he would have voted just then for a $225 billion tax increase. He would have voted just then to raise your gas taxes because that was in the bill. He would have voted to raise yes for diesel taxes for our truck drivers. And it also had a natural gas increase for those who heat their homes. And in there it had 87,000 more auditors that were, and 50% of these new audits are going to fall on people earning $75,000 and less. That's what he said he was going to vote for. I will tell you, this district does not support that.
Senator, go ahead.
He still didn't answer the question about health care and what he's going to do to lower your health care costs. And he's defensive in trying to hide it. And I understand why. When you vote against lowering prescription drug costs for working families, you have to answer to it. When you vote against lowering insurance premiums for working families, you have to answer to it. And if you want to make this about whether or not who's standing up for working families, you voted against the gas gouging bill that would have made sure that we were lowering prices on behalf of everyday people. When you had the opportunity, you voted on behalf of corporations. Whereas when I've had the opportunity, I voted to make sure we're supporting businesses and supporting working families. I'm always going to fight on behalf of working families.
Thank you, Senator. We have been inundated with advertisements on your behalf, and given the volume, we're sure that you've seen a couple of them. What do you believe is the biggest misconception about yourself that you've seen, and how do you set the record straight? We'll start with Senator Vargas.
One, I think you've seen the ads and the negative ads. There's millions of dollars that is coming in. A lot of it's coming in from out of the state. The thing that I'm really proud of is that we have a historic campaign. We have raised more resources from Nebraskans than has ever been raised for any race in Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District. It pales in comparison to Congressman Bacon. Most of his money is from out of state and from corporations. One of the biggest misconceptions here is who I fight on behalf of. Look, I got elected to leadership in the Nebraska legislature as a Democrat. I worked across the aisle and passed more than 55 bills. I've balanced budgets and fought on behalf of working families. And I voted to provide property tax relief and income tax relief and Social Security relief for working families because it was the right thing to do, and controlled our spending for years to make sure that we can do everything we can to control and balance our budget. I know this threatens Congressman Bacon because at the end of the day, I've been fighting on behalf of working families. Making $12,000 a year as a working public servant in comparison to Congressman Bacon making more than $1 million on the taxpayer salary as a member of Congress, there's a clear difference between who works on behalf of you and who he works for, which is one of the reasons why I'm asking for your vote this November 8th, because I'm always going to fight for you.
Congressman, your turn.
Tony implies he's had no other jobs during his time in Senate, and that's also misleading. I think the things that have been used in attacks on me, the voters are already wise to. Tony's going on it tonight about Medicare and Social Security. It's the same attack line that's been used over the last 6 years. I think voters know it's not true. I've had other ads about water and a whole bunch of other things. Voters know me. I've been here. I have a 98% name ID and face ID, and people know who I am, whether they support me or don't support me. They know that I started off as a working class man on the farm. I've worked my way up. I love my country. And by the way, Tony, I don't get scared or threatened. I deployed in war 4 times. I served my country for 30 years while you were in New York City, right? So I don't get threatened or scared by the attack ads. I think the one thing that Tony is going to have to answer for that he has not, and it's been brought out in these ads that we see on TV from outside groups and various groups. Crime is a big problem in our country right now, but he voted to allow felons, murderers, rapists, people who have molested young children, to go to their parole boards 2 years early. We do not want that. We've seen this all over the country, and crime is spiking. We don't want that here. And he's also got to address the fact that he voted present, not voting, or just skipping votes almost 20% of the time. The voters here want to know why, and why was he side with the felons and not the victims.
Senator, go ahead.
This is exactly why people don't like politics, because, and you've heard this before, these are scare tactics. You heard it. This is the reason why I'm running for Congress, because I've actually worked to get things done in this state. I care about public safety, and I care about investing in making sure our communities are safe. That's why I voted to make those investments in millions of dollars every year for law enforcement. And yes, it does threaten Congressman Bacon, because we're seeing all these attack ads. There's more than $4 million of desperate attack ads. It's clear that there are people that are doing everything they can to try to spread misinformation and scare tactics, what we usually see in politics. I've fought for working families, and that's been my record in the Nebraska legislature.
Congressman?
Well, he didn't fight too hard when he's skipping votes 1/5 of the time. He's not willing to take the hard votes. And when it comes to crime, allowing rapists and murderers to meet their parole boards 2 years early is not supported by this state or this district. It's why crime is skyrocketing all over the country. We do not want that here. And he does not support police. During the riots 2 years ago, he was out there leading the riots, instigating the riots. The police were watching it. We have firsthand testimony of it. And he criticized the police for the violence when they were the ones getting injured. There was dozens of injuries to the police, and he was out there instigating, and he blamed the police. And Tony Conner was right, the union president. He said Tony Vargas was standing on the backs of the police to increase his name.
Okay, now the abortion issue. We're going to ask you both now to explain your positions on abortion. We're going to offer specific questions to each of you in this round. So first, we're going to start with Congressman Bacon. In a Nebraska Right to Life survey, the only abortion exception that you noted was to prevent the death of the mother. You did not answer whether if abortion should be legal in no case, and you did not make an exception for rape and incest. Now you've said that you support the Lindsey Graham bill for a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks that may offer some exceptions. So please explain your position.
On principle, and because of my Christian faith, I am pro-life. I believe God has created us in his image, like most devout Catholics, most devout evangelicals and Orthodox folks that share these beliefs. And I believe the most defenseless deserve our protection. But I also know as a legislator, you have to move within the lanes of what the voters will allow. And there is overwhelming evidence in the district and in the nation that voters would like a 15-week restriction. And it's overwhelming evidence. I had yesterday going door to door. A lady says, Don, I'm pro-choice, but I support restrictions from 12 to 15 weeks. That is a very common answer here. I will support that because it moves us forward. You know, Europe has gone there. 50 countries in Europe, 47 countries support 15-week restrictions or even more restrictive. Only 3 do not. There's 27 countries out of 50 support 12-week restrictions or more restrictive. Only 7 countries in the world share my opponent's view of 0 restrictions. 7 countries. Only 1 in 5 voters, and not even that, support abortion on demand until birth, which is 0 restrictions, and 8 different news sources or media sources have asked Tony, what restrictions? He's either said none or he refused to answer. 0 restrictions is abortion on demand until birth, and less than 1 in 5 voters support that. I will meet the voters where they're at, which is 15 weeks. That's where most of Europe is at, and we can make progress here, and we can do it with the support of the majority of Americans.
Congressman, thank you. Senator Vargas, you said Thursday that you do not support abortion up until birth, but in the past you have often deferred when pressed about where you draw the line. So your opponent has said that your opposition to restrictions amounts to support of abortion on demand. How far into a pregnancy or under what circumstances, if any, do you feel that abortion should not be an option?
Thank you very much. Look, I'm against abortion on demand and against abortion up until birth. And I did say that in the last debate, Congressman Bacon, but the reason why this is really an important issue on behalf of women in this district is he's trying to hide his position on this. He's been trying to hide his long-held position. he has co-sponsored the most aggressive abortion ban in this country and had been the original co-sponsor of the bill. It would have punished women and it would have criminalized doctors. It had no exceptions for the life of the mother, rape or incest in this bill. And he has been on national TV doing everything he can, talking about, I will support a national abortion ban. He's trying to hide his stance because he is out of step with voters. And he continues to try to ride this and be seen like he's moderate on this issue because he's afraid. At the end of the day, women deserve to know on this issue that you want to make decisions on their behalf. You believe as an elected official, you should be making decisions on behalf of women. I believe that that decision needs to stay between a women and their doctors. Because even though you've been publicly supporting the Texas abortion ban, and even want an abortion ban in the Constitution, you can't hide from your own words that you have stated on this issue.
Congressman?
You did not hear him answer your question, Julie. He cannot mention one restriction he is for, which means he's for abortion on demand until birth. Zero restriction. Only 7 countries in the world have no restrictions on abortion. Less than 1 in 5 voters are where Tony's at. And Tony, you don't represent women on this. The far majority of women do not want zero restrictions on abortion or abortion on demand till birth. The far majority of voters say they want 15 weeks. Even in Nebraska, it's even a little more conservative. I will meet the voters where they're at on this because I think it is progress. By the way, 47 out of 50 countries in Europe are also there. I want to see us move forward. You want to keep us back with North Korea and China and those 7 countries that have zero restrictions. The science has moved
Time's
past
up.
you, Tony.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator?
Thank you. This happened in the last debate too. Congressman Bacon wants to make this more divisive and is echoing violent leaders across this country and is trying to connect me with that. I want you to really keep focused on this handed issue. I already said that I'm against abortion on demand. But the real crux of the issue is, who do you stand on behind of? You need to make sure that you are clear. Congressman Bacon, you support an abortion ban in the Constitution. You support the most aggressive abortion bill in this country and have been a co-sponsor of it. You will do everything you can to ban abortion in this country. And a fundamental thing that I want to make sure the voters know is that I'm going to leave this privacy up to women and their doctors and fight for your freedom, whereas Congressman Bacon, you want to make this decision on their behalf.
Thank you, gentlemen. Well, our next question is about the environment. University of Nebraska's Drought Mitigation Center has areas of northeast and southwest Nebraska in exceptional drought conditions. Do you believe that this is cyclical or a sign of climate change? And what kind of climate policy do you support to protect future generations? We'll start with Senator Vargas.
Thank you. Well, one, we need to make sure that we are being honest. Climate change is real. We need to make sure we're addressing everything we possibly can to address climate change. That means investing in the clean energy kind of jobs that are going to make sure that we are being competitive on a global scale, and also making sure we're addressing as much of our responsibility of making it harder for taking care of our climate. It's one of the reasons why I worked on trying to make it easier for us. We have a climate change climate plan study in place. We just reauthorized that in the Nebraska legislature. I've worked to make sure we're investing in renewable resources, and I also have done everything I can to make sure we're protecting our water rights in Nebraska and funded these efforts because agriculture is our #1 industry. We cannot forget that there's both the possibility of our climate continuing to change, and we have more that we can do to address that, but also that at the end of the day, we can do a lot more to address our economy and invest in it, in agriculture, while also taking care of our land.
Congressman, your response.
Well, it's a great question. I think there are some cyclical impacts, but there is clearly some climate change as well. It's a combination. We've seen that in our ports. As part of the Armed Services Committee, I've traveled to our ports. Every year the water level goes up about 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters. And over 20 years, that has a terrible impact. So it's both. But we have a moral obligation to ensure that we have a cleaner and better planet that we give to our kids and grandkids. I am committed to that. I believe in the all-of-the-above energy approach. I was the leader on the Republican side for getting the solar tax credit and the wind tax credit put back into the tax reform bill. They were taken out, and I thought it was wrong. So we got it back in, and the folks who rely on solar and wind will tell you I was their champion on that. I'm also a supporter of geothermal. I think it has promise. We have to continue using our water for dam generation. There's new technology for nuclear that's much more safe. By the way, France has gone 95% nuclear, and they're not having any of those issues that you're seeing in Germany right now and some of the other countries. But we're also got to be honest with ourselves. We're going to have, for a while, fossil fuels, whether it's coal or hopefully increasingly more natural gas. I'm a supporter of carbon capture. If you're going to use fossil fuels, capture the carbon up there. But unfortunately, the other side of the aisle have resisted that. And I just think it's a mistake. I've supported battery research to expand on that. And finally, I'm the Republican leader for the growing climate solutions bill that will help our farmers get carbon credits right here in Nebraska.
Thank you, Congressman. Senator Vargas, your rebuttal.
Thank you. Look, I'm a former science teacher, and I'm also a father. I care whether or not our land and our water and our climate are protected. That's why I want to make sure that we're investing in the type of energy solutions that are both renewable and reforming some of our existing solutions. I've worked on that in the legislature and have voted for it. I want to make sure we send a member of Congress that is willing to do both keeping up to date with what we're doing here in the country, with making sure we're addressing climate change, and have a better answer than saying we have some climate change, but actually definitively saying climate change is real and we can do a much better job as Nebraskans and human beings for addressing this issue.
Congressman, would you like to respond?
Well, we do have climate change, but it's not the sole impact. One year you can have more rain than the other year. You do have cyclical movements here, but we do have climate change. But I got to just speak up too that the left part of our country, the left-wing part of the Democrat Party, has drinking the Kool-Aid on this and have gone extreme to the point where they have been waging war on our natural gas industry and coal industry. Hence, our production is not near where it could be in a time where we had growing demand. That's why prices went up. We need to have a president and a Congress that's committed to energy independence. It is wrong to cut our production, then go begging Venezuela, begging the Middle East or the OPEC countries to drill more. America be energy independent just like we are agriculture independent, and it should be a pillar of our economic strength.
All right, thank you guys. Okay, because we have time constraints, we're going to ask for 1-minute responses to our final question, no rebuttal, okay? All right, we've heard your opinions on the Biden administration's effort to forgive some student loan debt. We want to look at future students. What should Congress do to make higher education more affordable to more Nebraskans? Let's start with Congressman Bacon.
I think the number one thing we can do is allow folks to refinance their loans, because I've talked to people right here in Nebraska or Omaha. They're paying huge rates. Some of them are paying adjustable rates. And with the interest rates higher right now, they can't afford to keep up, and they're actually gaining or growing more in debt even as they're making payments. So we need to make it allow them to redo their loans so they can get a much more affordable interest rate. I think we have to encourage folks to look at various opportunities that are being offered throughout our employers. You know, like Walmart offers a free education, Starbucks offers free education. I did 30 years in the Air Force. I got 2 degrees from that. We should encourage that. And I think we also need to let people know that you can get a trade, that these are high-paying jobs that people go into, whether it's welding, being a carpenter, being a plumber or a pipe fitter. High-paying jobs, and they will train you and pay you while you're being trained, and you also get health care out of that. So I think there's a lot more we could do to expand the aperture of our young folks so they know what's available to them.
Thank you. Senator Vargas, 1 minute.
Thank you. I think we need to make sure that we're continuing to reform many of the different systems and programs that we have in higher education. We can reform our Pell Grants. I've worked on making sure that we're doing more of this in the legislature while making sure that higher education is more affordable, investing in some of the grant programs. I think we can also do a lot more to get people into the kind of jobs that are going to make it easier for them to be able to save and have a middle-class income. It's one of the reasons why I'm proud to have received the endorsement from the AFL-CIO, representing more than 120 labor unions across the state. And I'm a product of a labor union. My dad was IBEW. I want to make sure that higher education is more affordable, but I also want to make sure people can get into many of the good jobs that we have here. And I'm going to do everything I can to create and strengthen those pathways, because if people are getting to work, that's addressing poverty and making sure people have a lot more to save for themselves and their futures and their families.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, we've reached the end of time for questions, and now we're going to move to closing statements. As determined by a coin flip, Senator Vargas goes first.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you for the viewers participating in democracy. Thank you for Congressman Bacon for participating in our second debate, and to my wife for being here in studio. Look, I'm a product of a working class family. My parents were immigrants. They worked 2 or more jobs, and they worked on the factory line. I know what you're going through. It's one of the reasons why when I had my first career opportunity, I became a public school science teacher. Then I became an Omaha Public Schools board member fighting to improve our education system. And as a state senator, for the last 6 years, I've been fighting on your behalf to make it easier for working families, not harder. I've balanced budgets, I've controlled our spending and invested in education, healthcare, and jobs, while also bucking my party and voting for historic tax relief, property, income, and Social Security tax relief. I did that because it was the right thing to do. And that is when I show up to vote on your behalf, I do it because it is exactly what working families need right now. But there's a difference between Congressman Bacon and I. When he had the opportunity, he voted against lowering prescription drug costs. He wants to gut Medicare and Social Security. He voted against lowering insurance premiums. And he continues to vote against a middle-class tax cut. But what he did do is give a tax cut to the ultra-wealthy and corporate interests. And he also wants to make decisions on behalf of women in their healthcare decisions that are private. And I want to stand up for your freedoms. Look, at what you've heard in this debate is he's quick to talk about the left and political talking points. And I frankly think it should be different in this country. Because I got elected by my leaders to be the vice chair of the executive board. I passed more than 50 bills into law. I actually controlled spending and provided tax relief by being a better version of politics, not mudslinging or making this about the left or the right, like what you heard from Congressman Bacon. So that's why I'm asking for your support, because I want to make this country better and help unify us.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman, your closing statement.
Thank you, Julie. I thank everybody for listening in tonight. I thank my wife of 38 years, my 4 children, my 7 grandkids for giving me the opportunity to serve. I also thank Tony for debating tonight. As I did before, I need to point out, though, in this district, we have always had 4 debates, and he turned down 2 of the debates. The Omaha World-Herald, the largest newspaper in this state, wanted to do a debate, and he said no. I hope the voters hold him accountable for that lack of transparency and doing what everybody else has done before. He's not raising himself to the bar that we expect in the 2nd District. I ask for your vote for 2 reasons. I have delivered bipartisan results. We have passed 13 bills that have made an impact on people's lives, not only just in this district, all over this country. I got $1 billion for Offutt after the flood so we could restore that base and the thousands of people that work there. I opened up a new $165 million runway at Offutt that I fought for from day one and got that done. We were able to get the outpatient care at the VA done that Brad Ashford started. I was able to finish that. Now we're working on the inpatient facility. We have a $600 million plan for the airport. It's going to be the best in the Midwest. $2.5 billion plan with UNMC that's going to bring in 10,000 highly paid jobs. And I brought in $3 billion of infrastructure work, which would be jobs for many people, but we're going to have safer transportation. It will help us compete in the world with trade and commerce. On the second area, the issues that Americans care most about, high cost of living, a broken energy policy, the worst border in the history of this country, and crime that's at its worst in 20 years. Americans want to change in Washington from the all-Democratic powered Washington, D.C., and they want a check and balance. My opponent will be a rubber check, a blank check for Biden and Pelosi. I will be a check and balance, and I will help get the president back to the middle in the way he campaigned so we can get American working again and back on track.
Thank you, Congressman. That concludes our debate. We want to again thank the candidates, Senator Tony Vargas, Congressman Don Bacon, for their service to the community and our country. I'm Julie Cornell. Thanks for joining us. Have a good evening.